Welcome to the Future Christian Podcast, your source for insights and ideas on how to lead your church in the 21st century. At the Future Christian Podcast, we talk to pastors, authors, and other faith leaders for helpful advice and practical wisdom to help you and your community of faith walk boldly into the future. Whether you're a pastor, church leader, or a passionate member of your faith community, this podcast is designed to challenge, inspire, and equip you with the tools you need for impactful ministry. And now for a little bit about the guest for this episode.
Okay, welcome to the Future Christian Podcast, live and in person in St. Catharines, Ontario. This is Loren Richmond Jr., and I am pleased to be joined
live and in person in 3D by Martha Tatarnic. This is our first time actually meeting in person, and this is your first time in Canada. So you're welcoming our listeners, but really I should be welcoming you to Canada. What do you think so far?
So far, so good. Trying to do some math with the kilometers to miles an hour.
Right.
Driving.
Yeah, you said that there's a little conversion help at the border, but then you're sort of on your own from there.
Yeah, it was 80, and they tell you stupid Americans means 50 miles an hour. I kind of wish like the car, and maybe it does. I wondered if the car has like a button you can push to convert it. Although it would still throw me off, because if I saw myself going, 80 kilometers per hour, I'd still think I'm going too fast.
Yeah.
I'm so ingrained in miles per hour thinking.
What about your spelling? Have you brushed up on spelling favor, O-U-R, donut, D-O-U-G-H-N-U-T?
I didn't think about donut. I use center.
Yeah, center.
What else?
Well, and then there's always the Z instead of Z.
That's right, yes.
So try not
Gen
to be
Z.
a dead giveaway about being American. I think spelling donut is really important.
With the dough?
Yeah.
And the nut.
Well, I just really like donuts too.
Well,
so.
What is Tim Hortons, right? What else?
Yeah, well,
what's the good donut?
So here in St. Catharines is Beechwood Donut.
Okay.
Which is really a special treat. So maybe we can get some Beechwood Donuts before you head back to
we have time,
the
but
States.
That sounds like that's important.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Hortons donuts really don't cut it. You need sort of the local, like freshly baked donuts.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Okay, but aside from donuts and spelling and converting miles to kilometers, what are some of your other goals in being here in Niagara and being on vacation? What's on your radar?
My wife Karina is here with us, and we'd want to do an international trip. And this is, an international trip. And I thought this is a win-win. I can travel somewhere internationally, see Martha, and then
make sure she really exists.
Right. Not just a screen. And then it's fun. We did this last night. My dad's grandparents lived in Niagara Falls, New York. And I'm pretty sure we found their old house last night, which was sort of amazing to think about.
Because you actually did go there as a kid.
Right.
So you have some vague memories.
Vague memories. But the house was built in 1875, which is just kind of mind-blowing to think about.
Yeah.
A house being, especially in my neck of the woods in Colorado, where it's such a newer, the age of everything is few places in Colorado are that old.
Right.
Especially established places, built places. But, I don't know if my house is still going to be around in 150 years for sure, like modern construction.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting to think about, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about that here of middle age when you think about what your values are.
That's right. Well, I am looking forward to the rest of our day after we record our podcast because my husband Dan is thoroughly steeped in the history of Niagara. So we're just going to put ourselves in the Dan van and he's going to drive us around to some different Niagara sites and some different Niagara tastes. And I hope it'll be really fun for you and Karina.
I hope so. Well, you have a project going on right now on sabbatical and a book deadline. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, it's very risky to ask me about my book right now because I could just spend the next hour talking about 16th century Tudor England, which probably isn't on your radar of topics for today. But yeah, I'm working toward a July 1st deadline for finishing up the book that I'm working on about Anne Boleyn and her influence on the English Reformation and starting what would become the Anglican Church. And I'm on sabbatical right now in order to get that project done. So it's all Anne all the time for me right now. But I will try not to talk your ear off and Karina's ear off over the next couple of days about
if I can
Tudor England.
If I can give a kickback or reference to a past podcast guest as we're recording this, my most recent episode was Suzanne Nadell.
Right.
And we talked about making it local. So you just got to make Anne Boleyn local. And then it'll work.
Okay. I'm sure I'm up for that
make
task.
It local or make it relevant, I guess, would be the translation.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of my whole MO about Anne Boleyn right now, why she matters for us.
Yeah.
But, I'm sure that when we get closer to the release date of the book, you'll interview me on the podcast. And
Martha,
I can tell you all about it. Yeah. Do I ever have an episode for you?
Yeah.
It's going to be great.
I think you've earned as much.
Yeah.
I think you've earned as much.
Maybe like a 2-parter.
All right.
Okay, so we aren't actually going to talk about Anne Boleyn today, but stay tuned. We're going to have, we thought that we should have kind of more of a laid back conversation today because we're so thrilled to get to meet each other in person. But I think that the topic that we've selected is important. And to me, anyway, it's underrepresented. I think in the mainline church, a lot of our work is in caring for seniors. And a lot of what preoccupies us is trying to reach youth.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That is kind of the split attention in the mainline church. So I thought, as two people in middle age, that we should talk about faith in middle age because it's pretty interesting and doesn't get a lot of airtime in the mainline church. What do we learn at this kind of midpoint in life, and how does faith change, and what do people like us need as people of faith? So I think that we should just set the scene because we shouldn't assume that our listeners remember every little thing about us. So Loren, why don't you start off by just giving our listeners a reminder of your experience of church growing up?
Yeah. So I grew up independent Baptist and was independent Baptist for the first roughly 25 years of my life. Went to Bible college and then kind of had I guess I was about 10, 15 years ahead of the whole, now what has been called the deconstruction thing. Eventually, through some people I met, got into the tradition that I'm in now, and the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, a mainline denomination where I'm ordained, have been through seminary. But I think what's interesting, and we were just talking about this on the drive over to where we're recording, is you were talking about, Martha, Dan's, how do you describe it? Home church? Or so that's the kind of language I would use.
Right.
How did you describe Dan's
His
church.
family church.
Family
like
church.
the church he grew up in. And...
Yeah. I mean, certainly in my formative years as a young person, like, Arvada Baptist Church is like the church that I would call, like, I don't know what language we'd use. I mean, I think about home church is the language that most comes to mind.
Yeah.
Well, that's certainly like a Baptist or conservative term. I don't know if mainliners would use that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd recognize that language.
Yeah. So, like, I recently got to preach at the Methodist church I'm attending, and I kind of, throughout the sermon, made a couple references or callbacks or jokes to, like, growing up Baptist and, like, memorizing scriptures in the King James Version.
Right.
And wearing a suit because Baptist preachers always wore suits. So certainly that's still very influential in my faith. And I think part of what's been important for me is kind of like reintegrating that in a way. Cause like, I remember when my daughter Lexi was a baby. So this was 12 years ago, like writing a real, like, kind of like scathing, like, oh, who could believe in, substitutionary atonement, for instance.
Right.
Kind of this, like, trash.
Like rejection of the whole thing.
And now I'm like, you know what? That's not my favorite atonement model.
Yeah.
But I can understand why people would resonate with that atonement model.
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting, like you say, about the mainline church, like obsessing about, like, we have all these seniors and we got to figure out how to get young people in the door. And there's like you said, there's this important and often missing middle ground of, like, hey, if we can get middle-aged people, like, if anything, like, there's probably a pretty good, like, financial revenue source. They're established in their lives and careers and they can probably support. They're probably going to offer a little bit more stability. But yeah, so for me, I feel like now I have mellowed out in some ways, but also, I don't know. And Martha, this is a question I was going to ask you too. Like, for men, at least in the States, like, I feel like 40s, that number, early 40s, late 30s, is like the middle-age crisis happens a lot in men.
All right.
So I don't know, like, this is a personal question, but did you feel like for yourself, like the kind of like middle-age crisis? Like, I know, especially for me, and I'll stop here, but like, especially kind of going through like a career, I don't know, transition. I felt that a lot, like trying to figure out, like, how am I, like, I still want to serve the church. How does that look like? Especially as the models of ministry change.
Yeah. I mean, I think just a lot catches up with you in middle age.
Yeah.
And, I think that is another reason why this underrepresented conversation is so important, is because, like, I don't know how you could get into your 40s without having, like, profound spiritual needs and, like, questions and, like, you've dealt with some real things by our age and are dealing with real things. And, like, I certainly need resources to deal with that stuff because it's not always a bowl of cherries, as my husband's grandmother used to say.
Yeah. Yeah, because even thinking about that, like, we're both parents of, my daughter's not quite yet a teenager, like, that's coming soon.
Yeah. And my kids are both teenagers and my daughter's about to graduate from high school. So there's that whole life change. And
I'm thinking about too, like, I mean, I don't know this, so tell me, like, I'm thinking about my own parents, certainly my wife's parents, and my dad's health and, their longevity. And, I joke with somebody, hopefully my dad's not listening and my mom's not listening, but I joked with, like, I feel like I'm parenting my parents as much as I'm parenting my kids.
Well, yeah, the sandwich generation, right? I mean, my husband's parents have both gone at this point. So, we've sort of already crossed that threshold with some of our parents. My parents are both in excellent health, but, I have been a pastor in the same congregation for 11 years. And so the number of people of my parents' generation who I have watched and shepherded through decline and death, and, have had almost that, like, they've been figures of wisdom and like nurture in my life. And they've been, people who have cared for my children sort of as they would grandchildren. Right. And so, like the losses do add up at this point. And I don't think that you can get to this stage of life and not feel like, okay, life is fragile and you've got to embrace every day. And it sounds like a bit corny to say that, but it really is. And, my parents are, when I said that they're in excellent health, I think we're all like really aware that we have to treasure that because you just don't know.
Yeah.
Like you don't know day to day.
Yeah. I mean, certainly now, and I'm curious, this brings a question I'm just curious about, like, how do you, like, because I'm noticing this now working again as a chaplain, thinking about my wife's work in the emergency room, like hearing stories from her about tragedy and loss. Like, how do you take care of yourself? Because I think that's one thing I'm noticing again so much working in chaplaincy is like these heaviness of these, like, that's so important. It's taking care of your own self with these heavy losses.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I think that it is a question that I would like our denominations to think about carefully and intentionally because when you are caring for congregations that demographically, like right across the board, do swing to the older side, like that that pastoral burden that you are carrying is different than I think a few generations ago. The losses can be fast and furious, and I'm just like grateful in the church that I serve that I have a couple of colleagues, my co-priest at the church, but also we have like kind of a couple of other key leaders at the church who we get to share with one another in navigating those losses, because we all sort of understand that these aren't just like parishioners, like they are people that we have loved and admired and being blessed to call friends, and they have like shown us a lot about how we want to live and how we want to live as Christians. So I think that collegial part is really important, and I try to lean into that, but there are lots of, and I run a lot. Like running is kind of my main antidote to grief, to be honest. But even at that, like, I think that there are still ways in which it can catch up with me in not the healthiest ways, and I try to be attentive to that.
Okay, so that leads me to another question. I was thinking about this, and don't quote me on this, listeners especially, but I remember from my CPE training, which is my clinical pastoral education training.
We did that too.
Like the leader talking about like therapy dogs having a shorter lifespan.
Okay.
And I literally saw that, like, cause in the hospital I work at, there's like a memorial wall to like all these therapy dogs, and a lot of them are dead. And I just think like, oh, every time I walk by, I'm like, oh my goodness, like, how is this impacting me? Like, I'm not sure what the question is, but I sort of am reminded of it. Like, the question is in front of me.
Yeah. So is it like a parallel to like our work?
Right.
We're the therapy dogs.
Right. like, is this work of, because I think like there's something, and again, I'm thinking of Andrew Root's book, Evangelism in the Age of Despair, about coming alongside people in their suffering. Like, man, I don't know how else to say it. Like, I find that so powerful,
Mm-hmm.
that work, and so addicting. I don't know how else to say it. Like, but also like after I'm done, I'm like, whew.
Yeah. Yeah. It has a big impact. I mean, I don't know what the like statistics are. I don't know whether you can kind of like map out numerically the impact that it has. I will say that, a couple of years ago, and it was in my last book, Why Gather,
Mhm.
like I really took a lot of solace, and I still do, from the mental fitness technique called ultra realism that I use in long distance running.
Yeah.
And it's like you can spend so much time worrying about what's going to come next, or wishing that things were different.
Right.
And how do you instead like attend to what's actually happening? And I think for me, the parallel in parish ministry, I think there's a lot of takeaways for parish ministry and for life and all kinds of things. But like when I start to spiral in parish ministry, it's when I think like, I can't do this for the next 15 years. Like I can't, like, it's too hard. Like there's just too much loss.
Mhm.
And so I really try to not think about the next 15 years. I try to think about like, okay, but right now, like right now I'm okay. And like right now God is providing, and right now like I have resources, and right now like I'm safe. So yeah, I mean, obviously we do have to, as leaders in the church, be thinking long range. But I think that we do also have to trust day to day in the God who provides, right?
I'm glad to hear you remind me of that, because, speaking of like my own ministry context right now, is very like ambiguous, I guess is a word, because like I'm working part-time as a chaplain, still doing a podcast, like I've got involved in this Christian nonprofit. But like, again, I'm in a stage of life where like I want to have like more certainty, and I don't.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to tell myself like I can't try to plan out the next 20 years. I'm trying to like, what is God placed in front of me? How can I be faithful in that? So I'm if anything, appreciating being reminded of that in this moment, because it's certainly tracking right now. Yeah. I mean, we've kind of been going back and forth, but is there anything else you want to say just about your own background and context?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like this has come up many times as we've been chatting with our guests on the podcast. But like I said, we can't just assume that all of our listeners remember our background or like aren't tuning in for the first time. So compared to your growing up in a more conservative denomination, I really have been thoroughly formed in the mainline tradition. I grew up in the mainline church. I've served in ministry for the past 21 years in the mainline church. So, you would think that that might mean that like my faith hasn't changed a lot in that time, which isn't true. Like I would say my faith has gone through a lot of iterations in that time. But one of the things that I appreciate about the podcast is getting to talk to and like glean some wisdom from you and from people who have that more conservative evangelical background, because it is pretty foreign to me.
Right.
Like I don't know a lot about it aside from kind of the negative press, to be honest. Like, and there is a lot of negative press, especially in Canada.
Oftentimes deservedly so.
Yeah, like I think Canadians sort of have this understanding of the evangelical American church being very wrapped up in the politics of America. Which it can be. So I have appreciated just hearing like really wise voices from that tradition that help to break down those like barriers that exists between our two worlds. And, I've had conversations over the years with people from the evangelical tradition who will say to me things like, gosh, I had no idea that people in the mainline church could be spirit-led.
I mean, we're laughing because we know, there's some truth to that joke, right?
Yeah.
They wouldn't say it as a joke.
They were dead serious, but
there's some truth to that observation. Something that I've appreciated about another observation you've had, or you use the framing of dialect.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really helpful framing.
Yeah.
Evangelicals speak a different dialect.
Yeah, and mainliners speak a different dialect.
Right.
And I think there can be a real assumption that if somebody speaks a different dialect, that they don't have a sincere faith,
Yeah, that's good.
But that's not true.
Right.
And actually, there is one Spirit, and we can all be led by the Spirit, but express that in very different language.
Right.
And we don't need to disparage one another's spiritual experience because they speak a different dialect. And I mean, that is, I would say, something that I have come to feel extremely strongly about 2 decades into ministry, which is that, I grew up hearing mainliners kind of disparage ourselves, but certainly being disparaged by others as we don't talk about our faith. We don't know how to give language to our spiritual experiences. And that just is not true. I think that in my experience, people in my congregations are just dying to talk about their experience of prayer and God and where they have gotten spiritual strength and spiritual resources. And just because they use different language to talk about that than somebody in a more charismatic tradition does not mean that those experiences aren't deeply important to them. And deeply important in shaping their lives.
Yeah. What do you think that lack of talking about it is about? Because when I grew up Baptist, it wasn't a super common occurrence, but I definitely have memories of there being testimony sharing time in church.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that it is we don't have that kind of built into the liturgy.
Right.
But,
that's it, because, Baptists are very non-liturgical.
Right.
And even, broadly speaking, evangelicalism, much less liturgical.
Yeah. But I think that experience of testimony does happen in our congregations. It happens in our study groups. It happens at coffee hour. It happens in one another's homes. I think that there is a real reluctance in mainliners to do anything that would be considered shoving your faith down somebody else's throat. That is not part of our tradition generally. But that doesn't mean that people don't express how God has guided them and strengthened them and blessed them. They do. We do talk about that.
Yeah. I think that's so important. Again, I can't remember. I'm very steeped in Andrew Root.
Yeah.
I can't remember which book he talks about. I feel like one of his books, the Ministry in a Secular Age series, he talks about the importance of testimony, at least as I interpreted it. But, yeah.
Well, and I would say, when we have been a bit more intentional in my churches about creating space for testimony, for sharing of faith stories, it does have a multiplying effect, you know? It does shift the culture toward other people, even if they're not participating in those studies, just feeling a little freer to talk as well.
Yeah. How do you think, maybe I'm getting in the weeds here, but when I think about testimony in my youth, like there was this kind of like, I think the real negative, and this is kind of what I'm kind of feeling these emotional memories of this kind of like pressure to like, you're always supposed to share like a positive testimony.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think that's the one negative I would say about like, certainly that conservative Christian culture is like, you're always supposed to like, this is what the Lord is doing in my life.
Yeah.
Rather than like, boy, I don't, like I kind of remember like the Mother Teresa quote of like the story she shared like at the end of her life or was shared perhaps after her life. I can't remember.
Yeah, it might have like come out after.
Of like, I haven't felt God's presence in years, like that was definitely not something you necessarily share.
Right. Yeah, I think that there is a lot more permission in mainline churches to be able to say like, I don't know where God is right now, or to say like, this is where God showed up when everything didn't work out, And I think that's a really important testimony is like, sometimes I think that we construe like trusting in God, meaning that we trust God to do what I want and expect. Yeah. And like, then when what I want and expect happens, that is God showing up. But like, I think the biblical witness, and I think the honest witness of like a person of faith is that like a lot of times things don't work out the way that you hope or imagined. We're not a theology of like manifestation. And so like, yeah, where does God show up when it all falls apart is a really good testimony that I think we maybe get more in the mainline church. I'm like interested, because I notice this in myself right now at this time in my life. Like my theological concerns are quite different than they were back when I was like fresh out of seminary. And
give me some examples. I'm curious.
Well, I think when I got out of seminary, like I was really eager to explain to people how the Trinity works, and like how it really works out that Jesus was both like God and human.
Yesterday was Trinity Sunday.
That's right. Yeah. And like I was so excited, like, oh, people just like they haven't had this explained properly. Like once I explain it properly, they're really gonna be on fire for this stuff. And I, I'm still glad that there are theologians who are working on that and giving us language and like different ways of thinking about it. But it's not really where my concerns are these days. Like I'm really interested in how our Christian faith like speaks to our experience of living in the world in the 21st century, like how it speaks to technology and how it speaks to pop culture and how it speaks to mental health and our relationship with food and world peace and politics. Like that's, I'm very like, that's where my theological leanings are right now is like, why does this matter for the things that are like most on our minds these days? But do you feel like your theology has shifted?
Question. I mean, my theology has shifted so much from being very conservative that it's hard to kind of like narrow it down. I think I feel very much those same kind of practical questions. Like I'm like an Enneagram 5. So I love kind of thinking deeply and taking information. Like I just read like James Cone's book basically on the plane. Like, I read 80% of it and just finished it last night. And I think what has really resonated me from that is like his basically question, as I understand it, was like, what is modern day lynching? Like, what is that in context today? Because if I understand what he was saying, it's like, Jesus was his crucifixion was like the modern day, or was an ancient version of lynching and vice versa.
Oh, okay.
And like, we can't, like his critique of white Christian America was like, we can't claim to follow a crucified Jesus and then not look the other way when people are crucified or lynched today.
Right.
So I feel like it's the same question you're asking, just in different words. Is like, how is it? Like, how do I honestly live out my faith today? And in America, I feel like it's so challenging right now because there's so much going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I can't be responding to everything, like, because there's so many things happening and some of that's purposeful. So how do I respond faithfully to things that I think are really important, but also recognizing that I could be wrong and that, I don't know. I think that just the moral complexity and ambiguity and
I think that is a really big piece too, certainly of like Christian leadership in middle age,
right.
is that discernment piece.
Yeah.
Because like I've found myself involved in pieces of advocacy or like community work that I never anticipated.
Mhm.
You know, like it certainly wasn't on my agenda to, like, for example, get involved with Indigenous water in Canada, or right now I'm quite involved in trying to establish a community benefits network in town, which is like working with different levels of government around like development projects and making sure that the community benefits from that. And neither one of those like were things that I thought I was specifically setting out to do, but like you do have to follow your nose a little bit in ministry. You have to be spirit led, right? Like you have to see where you're led and like where your gifts kind of align with a need of the world. But then I think the other part of that whole discernment piece is being able to recognize that you can't do everything, you know, and to be okay with that as well.
Yeah.
Like it's okay to follow a lead and pursue a piece, and to be able to do something rather than nothing, because you can't do everything.
Okay, something I've got to ask you, and this is kind of off script, but forgive me. I think because you've been in quote unquote ministry 20 years now, right?
Yeah, over 20 years.
And I'm curious, like, what do you think has worked for you or helped you sustain that? Because I think, like, even now, like, I don't know if it's my personality, and I wonder maybe if you think personality has something to do with it. Like, I could not be the quote unquote senior pastor, lead pastor. Like, I just don't have the social energy for it. And I wonder if that's a lot of what it is like, as much as I would to love to be on a church staff somewhere. So I don't know if maybe it's like, there's just not the right fit right now in my world. But I wonder, like, I know you've talked about this before, like team ministry being an important part of what sustained you.
Yeah, I've been a bit of a broken record about that because I have always served on a team, even when I've been in a smaller church. And I feel extremely grateful for that because it has allowed me to not be good at everything.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like there's a lot of parts of ministry that I would not say come naturally to me. And I've had to get good at doing them. Yeah. Like it is not in my nature to get up in front of a crowd and speak. It's not, I am an introvert by nature, but like it is a very extroverted job. Right. So in those pieces, I think what has sustained me is calling. Like just being really clear that, okay, like this is what I'm being called to do. So I need God to like provide the the strength and resources and
Right.
like ability to be able to do it. And also like I'm not going to do it forever.
I'm curious. I'm thinking again to a past guest, and hopefully I get her name right. Ariana Molloy.
Oh yeah.
She talked about, I can't remember if this is our conversation or conversation she was on another podcast I listened to. She talked about kind of like, I can't remember the term, job mapping, or like kind of, if you're in a job that doesn't obviously, and two jobs will like 100% align with your calling, like trying to shift the job requirements so that more stuff aligns with what you're gifted to. Do you
Yeah.
think that's been something you've tried to utilize?
I think like what comes to mind is when we went into COVID and I sort of had this sense during COVID, like I want to have more fun in ministry. So I have like tried to build in some parts in ministry that I just find really fun. Like, for example, our Wednesday night worship, we have a band that leads the worship, like, probably 4 or 5 times a year. And so I sing with them, which is like totally not part of my job description, but it is fun.
Yeah.
And if I'm not like preaching on a Sunday, I will sometimes sing with the choir and like, just getting to, be an alto and like play a supporting part in worship rather than like being constantly in the spotlight of worship.
Yeah.
Those parts have been like very sustaining for me because they just allow me to like have fun,
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. So I'm interested, like, you've obviously been involved in Future Christian for a lot longer than I have, and you do the bulk of the episodes. I get to play more of a supporting role in Future Christian. But like these week in, week out conversations that you're having with like leading minds in Christian leadership, like how has that shifted your sense of what the most important conversations are happening in the church right now?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think, I don't know, and I could be wrong on this, but I feel like the big question, and this is kind of like what I preached about when I was a preach a few weeks ago, is like the belief in God thing. And you kind of like, when you hinted about that, about like, or when you're joking about the Trinity, like, oh, people just need like the right understanding of the Trinity.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's so beyond what most people's concept is. I feel like the idea is like, does God exist? And if so, like, what does that mean? Because I feel like there's just so much pressure to like the whole society, and I don't know what's like in Canada, perhaps even more so in the States, or than in the States, if cliches are correct, like that we can function as if God does not exist. And because there's like this performative aspect of society right now, like, you're supposed to like almost be an Instagram influencer about, oh, I'm a fitness, I'm a runner like Martha and I are, we're into running, and, we gotta like perform that on our Instagrams. I don't at least, we've got to be good Christian influencers. So I feel like because of that, there's so much, I don't know, to me, and I could be wrong on this, I feel like that's I feel like that's a societal Christian thing that we're not, I don't know. I'm struggling to put into words. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that it is such an important point. Like, I think that and it comes back to that, like, middle age question. And I think the spiritual needs of people our age, like, yeah, we've been brought up kind of in this massive like communication sea change, you know, like I was in high school when we first got the internet, and like we just seem a million miles away from first getting the internet, right? Like now we live on the internet. And
my wife was watching a movie last night, Sandra Bullock, Ryan Reynolds, The Proposal, and then she's in Alaska and she gets up on dial-up internet, and you hear that.
Yeah.
Whatever that noise is. And she kind of like asks, like, what is that noise? I'm like, Sandra Bullock, she would have known what that noise is. Like, her character would have known. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, but like those questions about how we do live as authentic people in that performative world. And you're right to say that the pressure to perform is way beyond people who make their life's work as influencers. Yeah. And then, that piece around like how much we can sort of accidentally live as functional atheists because we just are very thoroughly formed in the secular waters, you know?
Yeah, I feel like the question would be like, does this matter? And maybe that's shaped from my own kind of milieu, to use a big word, of like we talked about at the beginning, like being middle-aged people, like trying to figure out like what really matters. So maybe that's just influenced by my own context, but I feel like, does this really matter? Like,
yeah. And then if it does, like, how so?
Right.
You know, and like, does it matter in just a very personal way? Like it gives me personal strength and meaning and direction, or does it matter in like a more like global sense?
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. And my bias is I hope it matters more than just as a self-help tool for me, right? I mean, as much as I appreciate, and I think that would be my one angst or hang-up, or I'm not sure. I think certainly that Christianity has been framed, I think, in many circles as just like a self-help tool.
Yeah, I agree. But somehow I feel like it's got to matter in a way that's somewhere in between the, like, okay, on the one hand, just a self-help tool. But on the other hand, if you don't get like the exact formulation of the Trinity right, then you're probably not going to go to the right place after you die. I feel like the God I have met and being led and guided by over the past 46 years of my life, like I haven't met a God who is like extremely hung up on the, you know, doctrinal intricacies of Christianity.
Like, I saw this, you know, because this weekend was Trinity Sunday. I saw this on social media, like, pastors, make sure you're not preaching these Trinity heresies.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, like, I probably at some point in my life have explained the Trinity to someone else heretically, like, but I'm like, is that, like, I get it. Like, people have spent their lives and sometimes given their lives for the sake of, but also it's like, is that really the point?
Well, and I by no means would I want anybody to hear this conversation and think, oh, like, I don't think theology matters or the theology of the Trinity matters. Like, I think there's something profoundly beautiful about like struggling to articulate our experience of God in words. Yeah. Like, I love theology. I love that people are still struggling to express it in words. But like, on the other hand, I remember passing a church like years ago that had on its billboard out front, "No room for heretics." Yeah. Which, like, there must be a story behind that billboard, but like, the church is full of heretics. Like, everybody's got heretical like things that they would express about like how they've genuinely experienced God.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is something else too, which goes back to your previous question. Like, I feel like I've become a lot more comfortable with mystery, and that's like the word that I just lean back to again and again.
I like that.
Like, I just can't quite put my finger on it. So I just will say it's a mystery. Not that it's necessarily unknowable, but I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind for me is awe. Like, though, that's the real feeling of encounter for me, is like those moments of awe. like just kind of running up against beauty, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't mean beauty just in sort of the traditional ways,
Right.
but like, yeah, that, and I think that's very connected to
Yeah.
mystery.
Yeah. Okay, do we want to talk about parenthood?
Yeah, let's make
'Cause I wanna
parenthood kind of our last.
I want to hear your wisdom there, because I'm a few years behind you.
Okay, well, I don't know about wisdom, but I do have a few observations about my kids and their faith that I find interesting because they're Gen Z,
Mm-hmm.
Z. Although they will always tell me, "Mommy, it's Gen Z." So I think that Canadian kids also call it Gen Z. So I don't think that like their experience is necessarily representative of like the whole demographic,
Mm-hmm.
but there are things that are so different about their approach to church and faith from what I grew up with that I find very interesting. So for me, I was the only kid in my church by the time I was a teenager.
Wow.
And that was fine with me because for me, it was about the ideas. It was about an experience of liturgy and prayer, and it was about learning and ideas. And like, that's what drew me in. I don't think my kids are that interested, honestly, in the ideas of Christianity. Like, they're interested in the community and they're interested in the friendship. And they're way more interested in the aesthetic of it than I was as a kid. Like, they really love like the traditional architecture and the like that sense of sacred space. Like,
Right.
that is meaningful to them. And yeah, so like that belonging, that friendship, that aesthetic, that space, that sacred space. And then like the piece around inclusivity is so, and that was important to me too as a kid for sure. But they, you know, really care about being part of a church that is genuinely open to difference and affirming. So yeah, those are kind of as teenagers that I just see really matter to them. And I'm sure that we could interview various guests who could tell us what the broader studies are telling us about that generation. But your kids are just like a bit behind them. What do you see?
I don't know, because I know that I felt this really like hit me like 2-3 years ago of like, oh my goodness. Like, I want my kids to grow up and faith to matter to them. And push back on me, Martha, if you feel differently, but at least in my context, maybe entering the main line when I was in my mid-20s, it felt like there was this kind of like osmosis kind of approach to the youth ministry. Like,
Right.
like, oh, they'll just get it because they're around it, but we don't want to, like, let's not push them too hard or they're going to run away from it entirely, which is certainly true. So I've been trying to think, like, how can I balance, not, especially, you know, my daughter, she's entering adolescence. Like, how can I not push or cajole, but also be like, I'm doing a handing motion. Like, hey, these are, you know, establishing some things that are important.
Yeah, I mean, I do puzzle about this in terms of like just how effectively, and I think this is shifting from what we've seen in the research and stuff, but you know, the general like pattern has been that the evangelical Christian world has been a lot better about being generative and like passing the faith on to the next generation. And but I don't know why, like, if I tried to push anything on my kids,
Mm-hmm.
they would instantly rebel. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how
Right.
it's just different in evangelical families. Like, how do they do that?
I can only speak to my context most specifically. I mean, there is, to use a family system term, there is the togetherness pressure a lot greater in those
Right.
cultures. So I think that's the double-edged, the shadow side, right, of that is they tend to have that generation or generative effect because of that togetherness pressure. But then you get these people who almost reject it entirely because they're like, want to break free of that
Yeah.
strong culture. So, I mean, there's a double-edged sword to that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to the Great Dechurching, I did that interview a while ago. What I think happens in mainline churches more than a rejection of the faith is that life just edits the faith out.
Yeah.
Like it just gets in the way. Like
Right.
and maybe that's a cultural thing. Like, people in the mainline church do tend to have social circles and, sports and arts and music commitment that are not church reliant. So
Right.
the whole social fabric of our kids' lives is not built around the church.
Yeah.
And
I think that's a big difference.
yeah. And so then you get into like, you go away to school and then you start a family maybe of your own or get a job or all of the above. And like life just gets in the way and it's not so much a wholesale rejection as just like.
Well, and I'm reminded of your guest. We're going to have to reference all these guests in the show notes. I'm reminded of, what's her name? The Mary.
Elizabeth Schrader Pulitzer.
Because for some reason her story has stuck with me because it represents kind of that stereotypical, like, grew up in the church, walked away for time, and then kind of was drawn back to. So, like, part of me is like just counting on and trying to seal myself emotionally now for my kids having this kind of like walk away or, setting it down or whatever metaphor we want to use. And just think like, what can I do in the short term to like kind of give them a good taste so that there's something, to use the book term, something sticky about
sticky
the faith, so that, they're going to inevitably almost go through that whole, I don't know if deconstruction is the right word, but like you said, life and stuff gets in the way and then be drawn back, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you want to lay the groundwork, as you're saying. I think that like you want to express why it matters to you. I think that you want to be visibly drawing on the resources of the faith to get through the challenges of life, which, as we started off this podcast in saying, like you get to middle age, like you're going to encounter challenges, right? So like bear witness to how you draw on faith to do that. But yeah, one of the like just essentially terrifying things about being a parent is that there are just all these things outside of your control at the end of the day. So,
okay, tell me what you think of this. I had this observation, and I texted it to a friend with teenagers, and he thought it was spot on. But I had this observation that having like little kids is like about managing their anxiety, when having teenagers is about managing your own anxiety.
Yeah, like there's definitely something to that. I've been saying lately, like if you notice a whole bunch of new gray hairs on my head, it's because like now my son is driving as well, and like having kids driving, that's a pretty big source of anxiety, but also like teenagers carry a lot of anxiety, so. Yeah, no, you're still going to be managing their anxiety too.
Wow, that's a lot.
Well, do you think that we should take a break? And when we come back, I am going to quiz you on your knowledge of Canada. Do you think that you're ready for that, Loren?
Yeah, scary and a fun challenge.
Okay. Well, it's such a blast being able to do this in person, and we'll be back in a minute. Okay, welcome back to the Future Christian Podcast. We are here live and in person in St. Catharines, Ontario, and this is Loren's first time in Canada, so in order to really welcome him to Canada, I'm going to test him on his knowledge of Canada.
Yeah, I'm nervous about this.
Okay. Well, so I am on a website here that is called the Canadian Encyclopedia. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and they're in the easy category.
Okay.
And these are randomly generated. So I took the quiz this morning and I got 100%, but my 5 questions will be different from your 5 questions.
Okay.
And listeners, you can try this quiz along with Loren from home. Okay. So here we go. And it's multiple choice.
Oh, okay.
Okay, first one. Banff National Park is located in which mountain range? The Appalachian Mountains, the Laurentian Mountains, the Coastal Mountains, or the Rocky Mountains?
Oh my goodness. I'm going to guess the Rocky Mountains.
You are correct.
Ooh.
Okay.
I think that was just more of a geography, like general knowledge.
Yeah.
I don't think do the Appalachians go up to Canada?
You're really asking the wrong
Okay.
person.
Then maybe
I don't think so.
My geography teacher might be proud of me.
Okay. Who are the Métis descended from? So, Indigenous peoples and Japanese fur traders, that's your first option. Indigenous peoples and French and Scottish fur traders and settlers. Vikings and the Inuit, that's your third option. Or, fourth, Indigenous peoples and Russian fur traders and settlers.
Oh my goodness. I'll say the Indigenous and Russian.
That is incorrect. It is actually the Indigenous peoples and French and Scottish fur traders.
Okay.
Settlers.
Wow.
Okay, number 3. So you're 50% so far. Okay.
I can't believe this is easy.
I know.
Goodness.
Yeah. In 1980, Terry Fox began a cross-country run, the Marathon of Hope, to raise money for what cause? Cancer research, cystic fibrosis, heart disease, or diabetes?
Cystic fibrosis.
No, cancer. Well, I mean, anybody who is a Canadian who's listening along would know that answer because he is like a national hero, but I understand why. Well, no, I understand why you wouldn't necessarily know that. And it's kind of interesting to realize that like this like national icon for us is sort of unknown outside of Canada. Okay, number 4. What was a term used to refer to Great Britain's acquisition of Canada after France lost many territories in the 7 Years' War?
Okay.
So the takeover, the conquest, the big oops, or the land loss? I don't know this, so just guess.
Land loss. I don't think that's right, but...
It was the conquest. All right. So
I'm struggling here.
That's okay. You're still allowed to visit us in Canada.
Okay.
And we'll still take you to tour Niagara. Here's the last one. An inukshuk is typically made of wood or fabric or stone or plastic.
Wood.
No, it's stone. So these are, you probably won't see them around here, but when you travel a little bit up north, you will see these little stone monuments along the highway, and those are inukshuks.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right.
I'm not getting invited, anytime soon here for permanent residency.
Well, you'd have to brush up on some things, but fair enough. 1 out of 5.
Sure.
You're going to know a lot more by the end of today because, like I said, Dan is a real Niagara connoisseur, so he's gonna He's going to share some of the history with you.
Well, I think this has been great. I feel like now we're going to have like is our home base of the podcast going to be St. Catharines? Is that the question?
Oh, I really like that idea. Isn't it like so nice recording in person?
Yeah.
It's so much better than being on a screen. So, if you can just like commute
every day
from Colorado to St. Catharines. Yeah.
I will say like the flight to Buffalo was not that bad. And getting across the border where some wood to knock on. That's not wood, but
yeah.
So far so good. But yeah, looking forward to doing more and seeing the sights today. But I guess, should we sign off with our traditional sign off?
Yeah, let's sign off with our traditional sign off. And also, like, maybe I'll have to come to Colorado at some point.
Yeah, that would be fun too.
Okay, well, may God's peace be with you, Loren.
And also with you.
And all of our listeners.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us on the Future Christian Podcast. The Future Christian Podcast is produced by Resonate Media. We love to hear from our listeners with questions, comments, and ideas for future episodes. Visit our website at future-christian.com and find the Connect with Us form at the bottom of the page to get in touch with Martha or Loren. But before you go, do us a favor. Subscribe to the pod to leave a review. It really helps us get this out to more people. Thanks, and go in peace.